Hello, everyone, and welcome to another how-to webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about how to use the LEGO Mindstorms Robot Inventor set and the differences between Spike Prime and Robot Inventor. Let's get started. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, the Robot Inventor set has 5 built-in models that have instructions that are shown in the background of this image. And each of these models inside the software have custom blocks that you can use to program each of the robots. And we'll get into what this means a little bit later. There's also a free programming area where you have access to all of the blocks that you can use to program. So in total, there's 6 different areas where you can program, one for each of the robots, and then a free programming area. Each model has further activities, which are different extensions that you can do to expand on each of the models and add new components to it. And this is things like incorporating different sensors, adding new models for the robots to interact with, such as a drum set for Charlie, as you can see in the image. And this provides a lot of opportunity for doing different things with different models, and there's lots of these extensions.
Next, we will talk a little bit about the hubs. You will note, and the sensors. You will notice that they are actually very similar. The Spike Prime has 6 universal ports. It uses powered up style cables, the very thin ones without a dedicated clip. It has a 5x5 LED matrix. And one of the key differences is that the Spike Prime is yellow. You can connect to it via Bluetooth and USB. The charging is actually done via USB if you are unfamiliar with the Spike Prime. There are multiple sensors available for the Spike Prime, similar to the EV3, the distance, the color sensor, the force sensor, which is similar to the touch sensor for those of you who know EV3, and has a built-in 6-axis gyro and accelerometer. The distance sensor is actually quite interesting because if you unscrew the back, it actually has a breakout interface that you can attach custom sensors to. Inside the Spike Prime kit, you will be given 2 medium motors and 1 large motor, and these are cyan. It also comes in a storage box and costs $329 US. And its expansion set costs $99.95 US. Next on for the Mindstorms. The Mindstorms similarly has 6 universal ports, same powered up cables, LED matrix. One of the major differences is that the hub itself is a teal color rather than the spike yellow. You have the same sensors, except for you will notice that there is no force sensor provided in the set. However, you can purchase one. The distance sensor is the same with the same breakout interface. And unlike the Spike Prime, you actually get 4 medium motors. You do not get any large motors. And these are a light bluish gray color rather than the cyan Spike Prime color. You also do not get a storage box, and the cost is $359 US, which is slightly different than the Spike Prime's $329 for the base set. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the programming. So why don't I just share my screen and we can show you a little bit about that. Okay. The left software is the new Mindstorm software, and the right one is the Spike Prime. So let's take a little bit of a look at the Spike Prime software. you can see that this has all the educational class packs and stuff and items for educators and also for first LEGO League teams. However, in the Mindstorm software, there is built-in code for all their base sets, such as Charlie, Tricky, Blast. And then if you click on each of these, you can get the custom blocks and custom programs for each one. And if I go to code, you will notice that if I click on the extra blocks, there are actually a lot more extensions than with the Spike Prime. You do have the same more motors and more movement and weather manager, but you also have model blocks, and there is experimental support for for physical controllers such as the DualShock and Xbox One. Now, if I go to the model blocks, you'll see for Blast, there's a calibrate block, and you can get a Jello stop block. These are for use with their built-in models. For remote control, you can either use a physical remote control, such as DualShock 4 or Xbox One. You would have to plug these into your computer and then run your program in streaming mode in order to use this. But there's also a different type of remote control. Yeah, here, which will allow you to
Click the button on the right-hand side. It'll open up the controller.
sorry. Yes. Here. So this is, I'll make this full screen so it's a little easier to see. If I were to click this edit button, you can create your own custom digital remote control with different widgets. For example, I can add a button there, and I can add a vertical slider on the right. And then what is actually very neat is that now when I go to remote control, you can see I now have access to the buttons on there, and the slider. And then they each have their own identification. And I can do things like move when I press the button, or increase my velocity based on the position of the slider. But overall, it is the same Scratch environment, so the programming interface is very similar. However, note that you do not have any remote control access or these custom blocks in the Spike Prime software. And in both softwares, the Spike Prime and Mindstorms, you can create a Python program. So just by clicking the plus and clicking Python. And we'll talk a little bit more about the programs being interchangeable later. But just to conclude, the interface is very similar, but there are some distinct differences in functionality. Now let's get back to the presentation.
So some additional differences between the two sets are in the number of elements and the type of parts that you actually get. The Spike Prime set has 523 elements. However, it does come with an expansion that gives you an additional 603 elements. A differences in the parts that you get is that the Spike Prime has that caster wheel part that is not available in the Robot Inventor set. However, there are other wheels that you can use as back wheels in, for example, an FLL-style robot that we will show in a few moments. The Mindstorms Robot Inventor set has 949 elements, which is higher than the Spike Prime's amount. It comes with 6 wheels instead of 4 wheels, more frames and panels, which might be useful, especially for first LEGO League team, as well as a new differential gear that came out as part of this set. Now I'd like to go to an overhead cam to talk about some of these pieces.
Oops. Let's go back there, and I'll remove my stream.
Okay, so these are two robots that we created that are first like LEGO style robots. This one being built using the Spike Prime, this one being built using the Robot Inventor. But for now, I will pull these aside just to talk about some of the parts that come in the kit. And so I have the parts in the set with me right now, and I just want to highlight a few of them. So these wheels, these ones are the same wheels that come in the Spike Prime set, except they're now in black, and you get 6 of them instead of 4. You also get numerous panels of different sizes. This size, and the smallest size as well. There's also a Technic baseplate piece that now comes in the teal color, as well as some turntable elements that might be useful for teams. There's the shooter element here that comes in the kit as well. That's quite interesting. And finally, there is this new differential piece. And to show an application of it, I'm actually going to show you one of the models that come in the kit, and this is Blast. It doesn't have its head right now, which is actually the hub, since we've taken it off to use on a different model. But what's interesting about it, it has this front cover that can come down, and inside you see this differential piece right there. And the way it's used is so that the head can tilt left and right when the arms are in the middle, and once it's gotten fully left, then the arms will start moving. And the motion is something like this. And all the 2 arms and the head all 3 of them are connected to a single motor through this differential piece. Okay, so now I'd like to take a look at how you can create a first LEGO League style robot using the Robot Inventor set. So this is the robot that we designed using this set. And as you can see, it is pretty similar to the one that we created with the Spike Prime, with some differences based on the parts that are available. Both of these have an example of an easy attachment that can come on and off. And the main difference is the back, actually. So you notice that the back of the Robot Inventor robot has these wheels here that come in the kit that we're using as back wheels, while this one uses the caster wheel that comes with the Spike Prime. This robot is built just using one kit. What's really great is that the set comes with 4 motors, so we can have 2 drive motors as well as 2 attachments and just a robot using the base kit, while the Spike Prime, it uses 1 motor from the expansion kit to have 4 motors on this robot. Okay. So I think that's all I wanted to show parts-wise. So we can get back to the presentation. There is a video that Sanjay is showing now that highlights the Robot Inventor robot design that we created and shows it in action performing a line follower.
Let me play this. Next, we're going to take a look at some questions that we think a lot of you might be wondering about. So Arvind, our first question is, can you use bike prime motors in a Mindstorms hub or vice versa?
Yes, actually, you can do both. You can use Spike Prime motors with Mindstorms hub as well as Mindstorms motors with the Spike Prime hub. And I'm actually going to show this in action by sharing my screen. So right here we have some Spike Prime code that runs motor A for 5 rotations. And I have my Spike Prime set up here with a Robot Inventor motor, and you can tell that because it is in the gray color. So now I'm going to run this program by clicking the play button. And we can see that the motor runs, even though it is a Robot Inventor motor connected to a Spike Prime hub. We can also do the opposite test with a Robot Inventor hub using a Spike Prime motor, and I will do that right now. So I'm going to connect my motor. Let's unplug this. Here I have attached the Spike Prime motor, and I'm going to connect that. And the screen I'm going to share is of the Robot Inventor software that Sanjay showed earlier. Now let's connect this. You might have to unplug and replug. I'll restart the software really quickly. Okay. And that should work now. I have been having some troubles with getting connected, but it looks like it's, let's see. I do have the program on the hub, so if that doesn't work, I can just run program 0. I got it to work. Okay. So here we have the software with everything connected. And this is the same program, but written in the LEGO Mindstorms software, Robot Inventor software instead. You can run that, and you can see that the Spike Prime motor runs. And this is the same if you use the large motor in the Spike Prime, since we know that there is no large motor that comes in the Robot Inventor set. If you have a Spike Prime one, you can use that instead. Okay. Do we have another question, Sanjay?
Yes, we do. Can you convert a Spike Prime into a Mindstorms hub or the reverse? For example, can you interchange the firmware or at least use the Spike Prime software to download to a Mindstorms hub?
Yes, you can can actually convert from Spike Prime to Robot Inventor software and from Robot Inventor software back to Spike Prime software with a few limitations that I will show. So while we have the software up, I'll actually go ahead and demonstrate that. So here's the software. This program is called Robot Inventor to Spike. And what I'm actually going to have to do.
What I mean is, can you download from, for example, Mindstorm software to a Spike Prime hub?
Okay.
Or do you need to change the firmware? Can you do that?
Okay, so I actually cannot just directly run a program I've created in Robot Inventor to a Spike hub. However, if you load the Spike software and you have, or if you load the Robot Inventor software and you have a Spike Prime connected, it will actually ask you to update the firmware, and that will actually change your hub OS to the Robot Inventor hub OS. So you actually can convert a Spike Prime hub into a Robot Inventor, and vice versa if you load the Spike software with a Robot Inventor hub. However, there seems to be some limitation to that, where if you so for example, there's this I don't know, I think this should show. I'm going to make this big. So there's this play button that's on the hub, and if I were to load the Spike Prime hub OS onto here, it actually still shows this play button. So there seems to be something underlying. Even if I change the firmware, there still seems to be some parts of it that stay as the Robot Inventor. But it does work if you want to run Spike Prime programs on your Robot Inventor hub. You can just change the firmware. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you, Arvind. And then our final question is, can you convert a program from the Spike Prime software to the Mindstorm software, or vice versa?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. So this code is called Robot Inventor to Spike. And so what I can actually do is, if you go into, on my computer, I think it should be like this. In your documents folder, there is a folder that says LEGO Mindstorms, which
Are
has
you
all.
showing your documents folder because we cannot see it?
Yeah, I'm not sharing it yet. I can share it now. So, okay, so this should show it. I have two folders open. This one is LEGO Education Spike, which is in my documents folder and has all of my Spike Prime projects. This is the one I was showing earlier. It's called Spike to robotinventor.llsp, which is the file extension for Spike Prime program files. Over here on the right side, we have the folder LEGO Mindstorms, which has all my Robot Inventor files. This was just one that I was testing out earlier, so it's already been converted, and you'll see how I did this in a second. But here's my file I was showing earlier, Robot Inventor to Spike.lms. And so LMS is the file extension for the Robot Inventor files. Now, it turns out if I just click on it or right click and do rename, I can just edit the file extension by getting rid of the .lms, and then type in LLSP, which is the file extension for my Spike Prime project files. If I do that, it will give me a notification saying, warning me about changing the extension. That's okay. I'm going to say that I want to change it. Yes. And it's turned into a Spike Prime project file. Now I can go ahead and double click on this to open it in the Spike Prime software. So here I have the Spike Prime software, and as you can see, this code that I wrote that runs it for 5 rotations, that was originally a LEGO Mindstorms project, is now been loaded in the LEGO Education Spike software. Now what I can actually do here is connect my Spike Prime again and actually run this code to see if it works. And you can see that right there. So I have the motor. And as we tested earlier, this will work with either motor. And I can click run. And as you can see, it has run my motor. The exact same thing can be done in reverse. I have a project called Spike to Robot Inventor that was originally a Spike Prime project file. I can rename this to LMS and then double click on that. And we should see it open in 1 second when I share my screen. And there we go. Share screen. We have our Spike to Robot Inventor program. It was originally Spike, and I can make this bigger as well, so you can see. And if I hook up and click run, it runs the motor. Now, it's important to note that if you have a program that that uses certain blocks that are only in one software, not in the other, you will be able to convert it, but when you try and open up the file in the other software, it will not open. So that's how you know that you have converted something that's incompatible with the other software. It won't open. So an example of this is a project that I'll just create a new one. If you had something that had, for example, the remote control blocks. So if I add the Xbox One controller, for example, and I had a program that drives straight when the left stick is up, this program would not be able to be loaded because there is no block to work with the Xbox One controller in the Spike Prime software. So just be careful when you convert back and forth. Okay. I think that's it. Anything else, Sanjay?
That is it.
Does anyone have any questions? We will answer them at this time.
I think we got all the questions, Arvind. So I just want to say thank you everyone for coming. You can contact us at team@ev3lessons.com.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you to StreamYard for sponsoring this webinar series. Bye, and we will see you next time. Make sure to tune in next Friday for the next how-to webinar, where we present different topics every week at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time.